Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we are running through the coaching carousel. A lot of signings have occurred, some good, some not so good, as evident by the fan base reaction. And there's also one school that curiously still has not hired someone, but we'll get to that. Huge news coming out on the weekend. Lane Kiffin finally gives everybody the answer after holding the college football weekend hostage pretty much. He's going to LSU. Everybody knew he was leaving Ole Miss. It wasn't a matter of if, but a matter of when. And he gets a new 7-year, $91 million deal, $13 million per season, second highest paid coach behind Kirby Smart. He has escalators. If he wins the SEC, it's another $1 million bonus. Wins a national championship, it's a $3 million bonus if that occurs in the same season. And he has another escalator that if he wins a national championship, he becomes the highest paid coach in college football. So, interesting enough, 80% of his salary will be due if he's fired without cause. Why is that interesting? Because, again, the governor of Louisiana saw fit to criticize the Brian Kelly contract and cause a whole kerfuffle when that went down. And now they're turning around and saying, hey, Lane, 80% of your contract will be paid out. So, imagine what that buyout would be if this thing goes up in flames in 4 years. But again, you cross that bridge when you get there. But overall, this saga, it's been very ugly because of not only the optics, but just, again, how everything's played out. Lane claims he wanted to coach out the rest of the year in terms of finishing the job with Ole Miss by being able to coach in the college football playoffs. So he wanted his cake and he wanted to eat it too because he wanted to be the coach of LSU while simultaneously trying to win a championship for Ole Miss. Because again, Ole Miss is going to make the playoffs with their one loss. So the whole idea was Lane wants to go to LSU in part because of the ease of being able to win a national championship compared to Ole Miss. Detractors would say he's gone 10-2 and 11-1 in the past 2 years. You can win at Ole Miss, but in reality, again, and people will say this is a new age, this is a new era with NIL, with the transfer portal. He is considered the transfer portal king with the amount of talent that he acquires coming to Ole Miss via said transfer portal. However, realistically, this could be peak Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. You got to remember, LSU has been decent under Brian Kelly. They started off hot, his first few years, but again, they haven't been the LSU that people expect. Florida has been mediocre for years. You're running into, again, the buzzsaw that is Georgia and Alabama when you do play them. It's just been kind of a perfect storm over the past 2 years for Ole Miss with their scheduling. Again, they are brilliant when they go out of conference. They schedule about as easy games as possible, so you can basically have a 4-0 record built in throughout the year. And then you just have to worry about the 8-game slate when it comes to the SEC. Now, will they get that break in scheduling in future years? Probably not. Again, you're going to have to constantly reload via the transfer portal. He is not the most active recruiter. He can recruit talent, obviously. You got guys like Simmons, the QB, who was a 4-star QB, and you are able to bring in kids from the transfer portal, but LSU pretty much recruits itself, being the only major college in Louisiana. I mean, in the sense of a Power 4 school. Again, you have Tulane, you have other schools in there, but it's not like, let's say, Texas that has Texas A&M, Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor. Yeah, the list goes on and on. SMU, Florida. You got Florida, Miami, Florida State. as the big three, and then you've got UCF, USF. There's a lot of competition there. Alabama's got Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Georgia Tech. Again, Georgia Tech's not on that level, but still, there is competition. What competition does LSU have in their state? None. And they have a pipeline into Houston, Texas, because of all the transplants that graduate from LSU that go out there. So you have the connections into a talent-rich state in Louisiana and Texas, which is one of the most talented states in the country when it comes to high school recruiting. Again, I'm not sure if this was the best way to go about it, but what's done is done. LSU gets their guy, and according to reports, Ole Miss is pivoting to defensive coordinator Pete Golding as the permanent head coach. And again, what makes this kind of ugly is reports are out there saying Lane Kiffin said, if you're not on the airplane with me, you won't have a position in Baton Rouge, talking to his offensive staff. So other reports say he's working and will retain defensive coordinator Blake Baker at LSU, which I think is a brilliant move. He just has to round out his staff with strong recruiters, so he has to do less of the overall recruiting, kind of just be the final boss, so to speak, when it comes to closing out on recruits. So again, LSU gets their guy. Will it be worth it? We'll see. I mean, if LSU isn't competing for national championships by year 3 or 4, this will look like a disaster. Because again, you've gone from paying Brian Kelly for a 10-year deal worth $90 million or somewhere around there to now escalating it to Lane Kiffin for $791. So back-to-back coaches with long-term contracts well over, $80-90 million. I'm of the belief that he can lead the offense with the type of athletes that he can get at LSU. And it's a matter of just, I believe, as I just stated, him rounding out the coaching staff with high-level recruiters to kind of pull the weight for him, and then he just does the coaching. That will be a perfect scenario for him and LSU. Will that work? I think there's going to be a higher floor to LSU. We'll just see what the ceiling is because, again, there's not a huge track record of Lane winning big games. The pressure will be on now because he has the talent. We're going to move on to a coaching hire that was not well received. We'll kind of bounce back and forth between these. We're going to go to Arkansas's hire. Again, there was a lot of rumors that Bobby Petrino's really pushing to get the job. A lot of people were receptive to it because, he finally came full circle to Arkansas and realized that he should have never left. He coached some good games. He had a productive outing against Texas. Again, they didn't really do much, but they were at least a fun team to watch outside of wins and losses. But he did not get the job because the job went to Ryan Silverfield, the former Memphis head coach. And the fan base and local reporters are not too happy about this hire. Silverfield at Memphis had a huge NIL advantage because they have FedEx money, basically the people who created FedEx and are in charge of the money with the company attended the University of Memphis and are willing, or bigwig players from FedEx attended University of Memphis and are willing to finance the school when it comes to NIL. That gives them a major advantage in the Group of 5 conference and or teams that they're facing. And the results are not that great. Again, once Mike Norvell left, they were a 12-win team that had just won the Cotton Bowl. And in the 6 seasons that he's been in charge, they have failed to reach, much less win the AAC. And he has a 12-20 record against opponents above 500, 3-12 against same opponents on the road. The reason why this hire wasn't met with such great enthusiasm is because Arkansas will not have a talent advantage in the same vein that Memphis does. They will not have an NIL advantage because Arkansas is focused on funding their baseball team because they have a high quality college baseball team. They are focused on funding their basketball team with John Calipari as their head coach, trying to make that more competitive. So they're not going to funnel a major amount of resources into the football program because they don't want to say the quiet part out loud, where they understand that they're not going to be a competitive force in the SEC. They're there to collect the check. Fans don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. Arkansas needed a coach that can offer a schematic advantage. I don't want to say like a gimmicky offense, but again, if you have a way to, spread RPO or air raid, something that keeps you different, pacing when it comes to offensive football. It's something that you need because, again, you're not going to attract high level talent to that university. I don't think Silverfield is the answer, but good for him for getting out of Memphis and finding a bigger paycheck. And again, he gets the SEC rub. And I'm sure even if this fails, he'll find another group of 5 team to take a chance on him or an even Division II football team. It's a win-win for Silverfield, but unfortunately, it's not a win-win for the University of Arkansas. We're going to move on to our lovely rivals in the middle of the state of Florida, where the Florida Gators have made their move after pivoting away from Lane Kiffin. Again, it is a rude awakening for the Gators boosters and fan base that they didn't get the guy that they were hyping up for the better part of a year, if not longer, that they believed he was their guy, and it was all wrapped up, and then LSU came along, swooped in, and took him away, and the Gators tried to save face by saying they were no longer in on the Lane Kiffin thing, and they were looking another direction. If you ask me, I think they made a better hire than what they would have gotten Lane Kiffin. I know that sounds crazy, but again, they hired John Sumrall with a new 6-year deal, averaging nearly $7.5 million per year. We've spoken about this before in this podcast. I thought that Auburn should have put all their chips in the basket to hire John Sumrall. He is 42-11 in 4 seasons across Troy and Tulane. Again, Troy is located in Alabama. I believe he went 24-2 there. And that's why I thought he was a shoo-in for the Auburn job. He already coached in the state. It is a prime SEC job. But it was clear I'm assuming after, I don't want to say a deep dive, but after rummaging through the internals of Auburn, he wasn't comfortable taking that job. And he went with Florida. Again, I think this is a better hire because Summerall has proven that he can win at different spots. He won at Tulane. He won at Troy. The key is, though, he hasn't won with a superstar quarterback. He isn't tied to, like, let's say, Mike Norvell with Jordan Travis looked like an amazing coach. And then once Jordan Travis is gone, it's resulted in what it is. He wasn't attached to some prized diamond in the rough, and then that's how he was able to get his record. They lost Mensa, I might be pronouncing his last name incorrectly, to Duke. That was their star quarterback, and he ended up transferring to Duke for a large sum of money. Duke went all in on that. And Tulane is still in contention for winning their league championship. So they recruited the kid. They developed enough as to where a Power 4 team was able to take him away, and they still turn around and keep on winning. That's why it's a good thing that Florida hired him. He has proven he can win. He's proven he can win at multiple stops, and he's a good recruiter. Again, he was at Kentucky for a bit, and he was their best recruiter when he was on their staff. So he's recruited in the SEC before, and he's been successful with it. Again, I do think this is a much better hire for them than Lane Kiffin. You're saving yourself $5.5 million that you can invest in player development, scouting, et cetera, as opposed to going all in with the head coach itself. Now we turn our attention to Auburn. Again, after not being able to land Summerall, a lot of people thought DJ Durkin was a strong contender for the job. We've said that on the podcast as well. The Rumors are that within the program, the people in charge of the hiring process were waiting to fire Hugh Freeze and replace him with Durkin as the interim coach in a way that he wouldn't be able to gain enough momentum for him to get the job, because there is a faction within the Auburn Tigers boosters that have a lot of pull that wanted DJ Durkin as the head coach. And if he was able to pull off the Iron Bowl victory, you might have not been able to go away from that and convince this faction that he wasn't the right man for the job. In their minds, luckily they lost. Again, you don't want to lose to Alabama, but I don't know if they wanted the powers that be to be latched on to DJ Durkin. So instead, the day after, on Sunday, they pivot to USF head coach Alex Golesh to a 6-year deal. Golesh has successfully revived USF after the Jeff Scott debacle, and previous before him, Charlie Strong, I believe. USF has been mediocre to bad over the past 5-6 years, and he immediately comes in there and establishes a winning culture. He was a part of the Tennessee Volunteers under Josh Heupel as their OC when they were their most effective offense, winning big games, making it to the playoffs, different things like that, or playoff contention. And again, this is one of those guys that ideally, when we talk about Arkansas, gives you this schematic advantage that they will need to compete against the likes of Alabama and Georgia, et cetera, because unfortunately you're saddled with those rivalries and you have to find a way to compete. And Auburn, for all their resources, for all their boosters, for all their self-belief that they're an elite team, they haven't been for quite some time. By going out and hiring Golesh, you're hoping at the very least the schematic advantages put you in a position like Tennessee where you can be a fun and effective team, and you will have those years where you can go 11-2 or, again, make this 12-team playoff and just hope that the chips fall in your favor. Will that happen? Again, you're hoping for a lot competing against the likes of Alabama and Georgia, who, again, Kirby Smart has that machine humming. Even in down years, he still makes the playoffs and or makes the SEC championship game. Alabama has hit some bumps in the post-Saban era with DeBoer, but they're in the SEC championship game this year. Last year, they were one of the first teams outside looking in. And what has Auburn done since 2013? You beat Alabama every once in a while, but not recently. You go out and you hire the coach from Boise State. That failed miserably. You go and hire Hugh Freeze. That doesn't develop the way you expect it to. And now you're wondering if Alex Golesh can be the guy. As a Tigers fan, that's all you have to hope for right now. So we'll see how it breaks out. Again, it hasn't been made official yet, but moving on to some other jobs. It looks like Michigan State is letting go of Jonathan Smith, and they're looking at Pat Fitzgerald, the former coach at Northwestern, who was fired after allegations were made about hazing and whatnot, but it seems like he was wrongly accused of that. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but again, Northwestern had settled with him recently, a month or two ago, with those allegations and paying him the proper money that he was owed. And it looks like he's game back in the game with Michigan State, although I'm not sure if that's been made official yet, but that's the big push. It's finally gotten to that point with Kentucky that they're going to have to let go of Mark Stoops. Do I agree with that? Again, it's probably one of those, you're not really going to go anywhere with Mark now. He's not really making the good hires anymore at coordinators. He's not really recruiting well. But my problem is you're going to have to pay $37 million within the first 60 days of firing him. That's a large chunk of money. And on top of that, who are you going to hire that's going to really massively improve the program? I mean, They're clearly invested in making sure that the basketball program, it remains a top tier program, and you're spending $37 million on top of hiring a new guy to improve your status by maybe 2 games. Was the $37 million worth it? I am not entirely sure if that was a wise investment. I understand why they had to do it. It's been a rough 2 years at Kentucky, and then you go out and you lose to Louisville 41 nothing. You can't be that lifeless. But again, is the investment worth it? That's questionable, especially once we see who they're able to hire because of this massive amount of coaching turnover. So, we'll see how that turns out. UCLA today just made an announcement that they're gonna be hiring James Madison head coach Bob Chesney, and Chesney's gonna be allowed to finish coaching at James Madison if they're able to make the playoffs and whatnot. But this is a surprising hire in the sense of this is a great hire for UCLA, which a lot of people didn't imagine they'd be able to do because of all the financial issues that are occurring with UCLA as a school, the amount of debt that they have, and they don't really seem that invested in the football program. But again, this guy's jumped from the FBS, has a 2-year run at James Madison, and they got an 11-1 record this year. I think, again, that is one of the better possible hires that you get for UCLA. Will it lead to victories? It'd be hard to say because, again, it matters how much UCLA is going to invest in the program. They're trying to move out of the Rose Bowl and go to SoFi Stadium. Will that make a huge difference in terms of how much revenue they can bring in from a bigger crowd? Because the Rose Bowl's 34 miles, 30 plus miles away from campus. SoFi Stadium's less than 20. I think it's like less than 15 miles away from campus. Will that help? But again, this is a statement hire for UCLA because before we get to the last person that we want to talk about, you hired someone before Penn State. Penn State's been left out in the cold right now. And who is there left for you guys to hire? Like after all this, Mike Elko got his extension. Matt Rule got his extension. And even if you did hire Matt Rule, is that really the needle mover that you want? Virginia Tech hires James Franklin. They've already poached a bunch of your kids. I think it was up to 4 now that have flipped from Penn State to Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech is soaring in the rankings for high school recruiting this year, and they've got plenty more flips coming along. Penn State just lost their 2026 QB to Virginia Tech. He's following James Franklin there. What is Penn State doing? You were one of the first major schools to make a move, and all you've gotten out of it is some of your top tier targets getting extensions. Like I said, is there a needle mover? Are you resigned to hiring Manny Diaz? I don't think that would be a bad hire. I think Manny Diaz is doing a solid job at Duke. I think he'll have more resources at Penn State, obviously, than Duke, and even at his time in Miami. Because again, we've discussed this before in the podcast with Miami and the Columbus crew all trying to help out Mario Cristobal. Manny Diaz did not have those resources at his disposal. And again, it's a learning experience. You were in charge of Miami. You kind of understand now the belly of the beast and what you need to do to be successful. Again, he runs a very aggressive defense. Will that always work at Penn State? I mean, he was at Penn State, their defense coordinator. He saw how it played out. It wasn't always the most successful thing against the top tier schools like Ohio State and Michigan, but was that entirely on the defense, or did the offense and the conservative way that it developed under James Franklin over the years contribute to that? So, finally, real quick, again, we talked about briefly other schools as well, like James Franklin, Virginia Tech, but I thought Oklahoma State made an excellent hire by hiring North Texas's Eric Morris. I didn't really expect Oklahoma State to get barn burner for their coach. Again, they don't have the backing of T. Boone Pickens in the era of NIL, which is when he would be largely needed, but that's not there anymore. But I do think with the offenses that he's been in charge of and the type of quarterback that he's developed, he has coached, developed, or recruited Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, John Mateer, Cam Ward, Chandler Morris, and now Drew Mestamaker, who will probably follow him to Oklahoma State. So again, I think that's a great hire by the Pokies, and we'll see how it works out. But again, I'm not sure they could have done much better than that. Again, after all this discussions, I still think the craziest thing to me is that Penn State does not have someone announced as their head coach. And as it has developed since you fired James Franklin, like I said before, I know he didn't win some of the big games or all of the big games. Again, we've said ad nauseum his record against top 5, top 10 opponents on the AP poll and whatnot. But the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And you're starting to see that now with Mike Elko clearly rejecting your program, with Matt Rule in all likelihood rejecting your program by staying in Nebraska. And again, if you do get Matt Rule, is that a needle mover to get rid of someone like James Franklin? Talk about someone who hasn't won a big game. What has Matt Rule done? He's a good program builder. He got that reputation at Temple and Baylor. And he's allowed Nebraska to be a winning team again, which is something that has been said in quite some time. But is that what you're expected to get at Penn State? There's a reason why you fired James Franklin is because you had championship expectations. Who can meet that now? That being said, it's going to be a busy week. We still have to review the FSU game, unfortunately, that passed this weekend. We'll probably have to do a review of season and see how it breaks down once the college football playoff rankings come out this week. Early National Signing Day is this Wednesday. We'll have some coverage of that as well in terms of major flips and how the classes seem to have finished wrapping up in terms of the high school rankings. So a lot on the table this week, and we'll try to get to all that. We've reached the end of this episode. You guys know the drill. You can find us on YouTube, 305 Insights. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos, throw some comments on there. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe there, turn notifications on, rate us 5 stars, and you can find us on Spotify as well. That being said, wherever you may be listening, however you may be listening, we thank you. And once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.